Hi everybody, this is Anne. In this video, we're looking to the past at functional ceramic vessels named biberons and bubby pots. These are drinking vessels with an elongated spout used many years before the more hygienic modern feeding bottles for children. When looking at examples of these, I expected them to be all generic functional forms, but was surprised at how decorative and sculptural some of them were, especially the ancient biberons formed in the shape of animals. I thought it'd be fun to see if I could recreate one of these forms sculpted into the shape of a sweet little piggy. To do this, I'll utilize the basic pinch pot closed form. To start, I rolled out a long coil about 1.5 inches wide. I cut out a section of the coil about 3 inches long. I wanted the ends to be rounded, so I pinched the sharper edges inward with my thumb. To smooth it out, I rounded it on the table. I finished it by wetting the area with my fingers. I did this on both sides, then cut this in half. Now I'll begin my pinch pot. I wet my thumb and pushed it straight down into the center of one of the clay halves. The farther down that I dug, the slower I went so I didn't poke through the bottom. Now starting at the bottom, I began gently pinching the clay outward, stretching the clay all the way up to the edge on the inside of the pot. I continued with this method, constantly checking to make sure there was no overly thin or thick areas along the wall. My goal was to hollow it and create a consistent clay depth from top to bottom. I'm also trying to keep the shape that I needed, which was that of an elongated oval. Here you can see that it's almost doubled in size from the original. I simply needed to repeat those steps on the other half and make sure that the two edges were the same diameter so I could join them back up. That works. Now I want to close the form. I scored the top edge of both, and then I slipped only one of the edges. I pressed the halves together and worked the seam really well until they were tight. I began smoothing the clay first with my wet fingers right over the seam. Then I compressed the seam and smoothed it with a red rib. I looked carefully at the seam and found one area that felt weak. To remedy this, I added a tiny coil of clay and gently worked that down into the thinned area. I ribbed that down again, working to smooth the form. Once the clay was smoother, I wanted to perfect the plump potato shape. The easiest way to do this is to roll it around on the table, alternated with ribbing down any buckled areas until I got the shape just the way I wanted it. Because there's air trapped inside the form, I can apply pressure to it and shape it without it collapsing. Now to begin forming the face, I flatten the end of the potato by pushing it against the table. Using my thumb, I push the clay down and around to outline the area of the pig snout. Here I'm using the back of my finger, or the corner of my fingernail, to define that circular area. I wet my fingers and push down and smooth the clay around the snout. I used my red rib to flatten the tip of the snout. I then slightly pushed in the areas above the snout for the eye sockets. Now to prepare for the feet, I turned the form so I was looking at the belly of the pig. I used fingers on either side of the center and pushed downward until I formed a slight ridge. For the feet, I cut off a 1/2 inch wide disc from the original coil I rolled. I quartered that disc into equal sections that will become the hooves. I took one of the quarters and started with the pointed corner. I worked the clay upward into a slope around the rounded edge. I then cut off the tail ends along both sides, so I almost had a sloped chair shape from the side. I repeated this for all 4 hooves. I refined the shapes so they were relatively identical. I laid them out on the table so they all sloped inward and could cradle the body. I gently fit the body down over the hooves and pressed down slightly so the body conformed to the supports. I traced the feet where they will attach, then I scored each area on the body and the top of the feet. I slipped the top of each foot really well. I then set the body over the feet and turned it over to attach the seams. First I used my needle tool and then I used my sponge to smooth out the clay. I set the piggy back down on the table, and of course the clay had shifted some, so I had to realign the hooves back down so it would sit flat. To make the vessel sturdy, I pounced the feet on the table to widen them out a bit. Finally, I used a paintbrush to smooth the inner areas of the feet that I couldn't get my fingers into. For the drinking spout, I rolled a carrot-shaped coil, longer than what I actually will need in the end, and I rounded the top edge. I took a wooden bamboo stick and pushed it halfway down into the center of the carrot and back out. I turned the carrot over, found the very center of that side, and pushed the bamboo stick through so it met up with the top hole. This way, you make sure not to poke through the sides. Now you can roll the bottom edge along the table, pushing down on the wooden dowel so it stretches out that edge and hollows it out. I placed the spout along the back side and traced it where I wanted it. I then cut out the inner circle of the traced area, opening it up. I scored both edges where the two will attach. I slipped the carrot spout, then attached the two areas together tightly. Remember, I'll cut down the spout later. Don't do that now. Now I'll create a funnel for pouring the liquid into the body. Starting with another 1/4 inch disc from the coil, I pushed my thumb down into the center and pinched it open. I continued pinching it wider at the top than the bottom, so it was the funnel shape. I flattened the bottom on the table as I was pinching, which created a very thin inner edge of clay along the table, which I just cut off with my needle tool. I put the funnel into place at the top of the piggy and traced around the bottom edge. I scored both the bottom edges and slipped the bottom of the funnel. I firmly attached the funnel to the body with my needle tool, then used a paintbrush to smooth the clay. Now I can cut open the center hole to the body. Now I can cut the tail down, but I don't want to cut it below the height of the funnel, otherwise liquid will flow out of it when filling. I rounded the edge of the spout and opened the hole back up. Now that the cavity is opened up, I used a flat stick to work the inner seam flat and smooth. Now for the details of the face, I shaped this little V-rounded piece of clay around my finger and attached it under the snout for the mouth. I cut these little pie-shaped pieces for the ears. I flattened down the edges, then attached them on either side of the eye sockets. Of course, I folded them down a little, like any pig's ear. For the eyes, I was going to place them down inside the sockets, but they look cuter right on either side of the snout, so I kept them there and reshaped his face a little. I couldn't resist putting 2 little nostrils in the snout for the nose. I gave him a final smoothing with a paintbrush before leaving him to dry slowly and doing a little final shaping when the piece was leather hard. Now here he is in all his cuteness. No, Jim, I'm talking about the piggy in the video. I made a few more examples. I set out to make a sweet bunny rabbit, but his ankles are more severe than I wanted, and I think he's a bit of an evil bunny. Now here's a tiny bird I created. I had a bit of a struggle with the funnel part and may go back to the drawing board with his design, but the face was so cute. And here are the pieces all glazed and fired. Now who can resist drinking from them? As with all my creations, this is just a jumping off point, and I'm sure you can come up with a lot more fun ways to design the bodies of these sort of drinking vessels, whether they're animals, fruit, inanimate objects, or even someone's head maybe. I'd like to thank the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. If you liked our video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.